Good morning. It's Friday, finally, again. We're live. umbraCoffee episode 143. And we are doing something a bit different today. Today, we are really happy to be joined by Martin Woodward from GitHub. Hey, Martin.
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you.
Brilliant.
So we had a little confusions before starting live that we need to define Martin from Marcin. But that's good. That's good. That's always helpful in the conversation to have some confusions in around. But yeah, that's a different episode. But content is still that relevant for all of us because as you've Callum said, Martin, you are coming to us straight from the GitHub, and you can probably answer and help us in a lot of questions and discussions related to this platform, who most of us, I think, are using or use definitely for sure.
GitHub as a tool has been something that's been in developers' lives for a very long time and pretty central to those lives, but also it spans across communities. So it's not just, whilst it's now owned by Microsoft, it's not a Microsoft community. The .NET community is there, the Umbraco community is there, but Java and every other community is also there. So it is truly this hub for the developer community, and I think that's what we want to talk about a bit today. So maybe Martin, to kick off, shall we hear a little bit about you? Would I be talking out of turn if I said you are one of the pioneers of open source at Microsoft?
Gosh, there was a lot of us, but yeah, I mean, my major claim to fame is that I actually created the Microsoft GitHub org. So that was it ran on my credit card for a little while as well, which was quite scary. But so yeah, I was definitely involved. There was lots of people though. It's it's the journey that Microsoft went on from obviously the whole Linux is a cancer days to becoming one of the major contributors to open source, and then to supporting things like GitHub and the communities that are all based on GitHub is obviously it's a long journey with a lot of people. So but yeah, I definitely I was very happy to play a part for sure.
So your history here is that whilst when Microsoft acquired GitHub, 2018 now, 2017, 18?
Yeah, 2018 was when it closed, I think. Yeah.
So you moved over from Microsoft. You'd been there how long?
I was at Microsoft for a total 10 years. So I joined Microsoft in November 2009. I was working on a company called TeamPrize, it was just a small startup with sort of 5 of us, and we were building Eclipse and cross-platform integrations for Team Foundation Server, TFS, which is a version control tool that some of the Umbraco community are definitely familiar with. And then worked on the Java side of that and the Eclipse plugins. And then Microsoft decided that was back in the days where Java and Microsoft didn't mix, and so we were thinking as a startup, oh hey, Microsoft are never going to want to get into this space. Let's go fill this space for them. So we did that, and then obviously the attitudes at Microsoft started to change. They decided that the Java space was important to them, so they acquired us. So the 5 of us came over, started work for Microsoft, and that was actually where I got my experience of Microsoft's kind of open source tooling and procedures and things, because our company was entirely based on open source and was contributing to an open source IDE, and so kind of had to learn what Microsoft's procedures were and kind of go, this ain't gonna work, and figure out how to start fixing them, and working with everybody to help make that happen. And then we did
through open source spirit, I guess, in Microsoft. Part of you joined at a time when Microsoft was relatively closed, and in the past 10 years has become ever increasingly more open. So I guess part of your background being open source and melding that with the existing Microsoft teams would be an interesting.
Yeah, it was definitely a good journey. When I joined, people were told not to look at open source libraries because they didn't want to kind of accidentally copy code over. They were also kind of contributing was pain. So I wanted to contribute an 18-byte fix to Eclipse, like 18-byte. And people that don't know, Eclipse is like a major Java IDE. Used by thousands and thousands of developers, millions maybe. And I was contributing an 18-byte fix to make Eclipse work better on 64-bit Windows. Again, complete no-brainer. Of course, Microsoft would want this in. And it was 18 bytes. And I think the to line, like the number of people on the to line was a more order of magnitude greater than the number of bytes in the fix to get permission to be able to contribute this. So that was when I kind of realized times needed to change, and we went and started rationalizing a lot of the policies. So easy now.
But that's amazing to see the whole story and the beginning of it, because when we were talking about those all announcements and movements of Microsoft and also GitHub at some space, everyone who knew the Microsoft and all the other problems around, they were afraid that it will be different. It won't be like that, like it is right now. As you've said, Microsoft is one of the biggest contributors to open source recently, and it's not like it was before. And it's good to see that this mindset switch and change, and right now open source is nothing scary for all of us.
Yeah, I think if you're in the .NET community, you'd kind of you'd saw that change coming, because obviously .NET Core and .NET and ASP.NET before that, they were kind of leading the charge for a lot of the company. But then if you weren't in the .NET game, then I think when Microsoft acquired GitHub, it was probably a bit of a surprise to you, because you hadn't really had to think about Microsoft. Maybe you were running on an Ubuntu box and all this sort of stuff, or a Mac machine. Whatever. You used them occasionally, maybe for Word documents and things, but you didn't really have to think about them. So then when Microsoft came along and started supporting GitHub, and GitHub's kept as a separate, it's a separate standalone entity, it's a separate company. But with that support, all of a sudden you have to start thinking about them. And so a lot of people's ideas of Microsoft were Microsoft of 10 years ago, not the Microsoft of today. And so, the company's definitely changed for the better. And I enjoyed my time working there for sure, and was very grateful for the opportunity to come over to GitHub.
So you when you were at Microsoft, you said you started working on, you were one of the primary people on the Azure Devops, and I guess VSTS before that.
Yeah. Lots of names. So
yeah.
Team Foundation Server then was part of the move from Team Foundation Server to the cloud, which was TFS Online, I think we were originally. Yeah. And then Visual Studio Team Services and Azure DevOps. So it was part of the rebranding and renaming to Azure DevOps and things. So did that whole journey, and then we were part of the we were the acquisition team. So part of the acquisition team for GitHub. And doing that, and then also I used to look after Coplex and things, which is where I first sort of really got involved with the Umbraco community. Yeah, exactly. So been involved in a lot of those things along the way. So
fantastic.
And what's your current role? What's your current responsibilities then?
I work on the DevRel team, so developer relations at GitHub. So making sure, obviously GitHub is all about developers, but making sure that a lot of the open source projects, a lot of the open source maintainers have a good feeling of GitHub and know how to, know how to use it, make sure we're a good home for a lot of our open source projects. So again, that's why I wanted to come on today and, make sure I keep the connection going with the Umbraco community, because obviously it's an important community for us. I think make sure you're happy.
A theme we'll see maybe as this discussion evolves is that I think Umbraco as a community is actually going to diverge closer towards GitHub than it has been in the past. Right. I think we'll see more wider adoption of it. I think this is something we've been discussing all along here. GitHub becoming this one-stop shop, regardless of your tech stack, really, regardless of your affiliations, whether you use AWS for your hosting or Google Cloud. You don't have to use Azure. You don't have to be in the Microsoft space. That actually GitHub's becoming this thing, but also for open source communities, because way back, 3-4 years ago, people were probably using AppVeyor maybe for open source CI. People were using Azure DevOps and VSTS. Sponsors, people maybe used Patreon and some of these other tools. I remember even having buy me a coffee links in README files on projects and stuff that would go somewhere.
They are still there. They're still there.
Yeah, and the same with discussions. Like GitHub was always just kind of code and issues, but it's evolved to be a hell of a lot more. You've got discussions now, which is something we'll talk about, which takes on things like forums and wikis, Stack Overflow, Gitter for chatting. And then Codespaces is something that for me, I think is really going to revolutionize at least how Umbraco and the Umbraco community is accessible, because I don't need to set up a dev machine now. And as a first-time contributor, I can click a button and get to work on the code in my browser.
Yeah. It's about making sure we provide the core components so the open source community can be successful and be that hub, and have the essential building blocks. GitHub's a very Unixy kind of company, and it's all about building these sort of fundamental building blocks that then the community can assemble and put together and do just amazing things with and extend in ways we never imagined, So yeah, we talked a bit about because obviously actions was something that was added, last year, which is ability to do CI and kind of extending those abilities to do CD, but it's done in a way that doesn't just do like CI, because what's the point in doing that? You can plug in Jenkins, you can use Appveyor or Travis or something. Where it changed is actions is actually an automation hook for GitHub. And it can automate any web event, any webhook that you've got around GitHub, then you can automate stuff around it. So yes, you can do it for CI, but you can also do it if somebody creates an issue, then go do something, and go do some logic and all these sorts of things. So for building these fundamental building blocks and extending it out, discussions is one. Sponsors is another one that you mentioned. Being able to make open source sustainable is something that we worry a lot about. And we can't, even with Uncle Satcher in the background and the big, the resources of Microsoft kind of thing, we still have to kind of make it work. And there's no way we could go magically help make open source, amazing with, we don't have that amount, we don't have an infinite pool of resources. But by introducing sponsors into the mix and trying to encourage people to sponsor developers who have, they've got dependencies that if you've got a dependency that you're very, that you've got taken, like contribute some money back to maybe help support it. If you can't provide time to support it, then maybe provide some money instead. So to help pay for somebody else's time. So just trying to make everything more sustainable, try and put the essential building blocks in there for the communities. And then, just enable these communities to just fire up and just be amazing and successful and wonderful. GitHub Pages is another thing as well. If you remember, in the old days when you sort of stop a SourceForge site and then you had to get a website and then you had to get another bunch of things and more bunch of things. And it was just hard work, and it's really hard when you're doing these open source projects. So what can we get in place to help open source maintainers to be successful? And then also use GitHub in your company as well, of course.
Yeah, there's a whole GitHub enterprise and all kinds of stuff that's probably a whole discussion in itself, because that's a mammoth of a product. But certainly all of these things that GitHub's been doing over the past since the Microsoft acquisition, Microsoft's in a fortunate position where it does have at least some resources, and perhaps more than maybe the competitors, to be able to offer things like free private repos, which again probably should have always just been a thing. But cost, and you need a differentiator. Whereas now it's about making GitHub a community accessible to every developer on the planet. And it's not, you're going to be using things like Codespaces and Action build hours to differentiate the power users from the everyday, I guess. Yeah.
And if you think about it, like we've got a massive shortage of developers. So this is what gets me out of bed every day. I saw some studies, I'm trying to remember where it was, but I remember it was like 500 million apps and microservices are going to get built over the next 5 years, because with all these people getting more and more into IT, with the way that we're changing more and more into IT, 500 apps and microservices over the next 5 years. That's more apps and microservices than were built in the entire history of Microsoft up to the point of the GitHub acquisition is going to get built in the next 5 years. And so we need to figure out, how we can do more as developers and how we can, make it easier to do the stuff that we do and improve the quality and all that sort of stuff, which is where CI and planning and all those sorts of things help, as well as version control. Because, version control was new when I was a kid, you know what I mean? It was just floppy disks and all that sort of stuff. So there's that. But then we also need to figure out how we go beyond and how we bringing new people into development, how we democratize development and make it so that if you're, you know, in a lower bandwidth region, say in Africa, that, you know, has that the pipe that goes around the continent kind of thing, and it can be quite bandwidth challenged. Or if you're in, you know, like Brazil or Colombia or India or one of these places where, you know, the education systems are amazing and there's amazingly smart people, but the internet gives them the ability to contribute code and contribute value into this global community that they can't always travel to. So yeah, trying to, you know, democratize it, get everybody, and trying to break down a lot of the sort of artificial gatekeeping that goes on for people who are from, you know, maybe haven't had the same kind of privilege in terms of education and things like that, and make it easier to get people into coding.
The democratizing thing is a really interesting point, and maybe this is a good time to talk about Codespaces quickly, because Codespaces was first announced as an Azure service or an Azure Devops feature.
It was a Visual Studio service, is what it was. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this is the idea is you can spin up it spins up a container in the cloud, and then you've got UI like VS Code in the browser where you can interact with it, and it wires up everything in the background. It's quite frankly bloody amazing. But that started as an Azure service or a Microsoft product, and then GitHub at GitHub Satellite was we've got Codespaces, and that looks great, but it was effectively the same or very, very similar product. It's kind of framed more towards being
optimized for the GitHub experience is what it was.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But the really interesting thing is now that the Azure service actually is being canned, and everyone's being told they should be using the GitHub service instead. So when we're talking about democratizing, Microsoft and probably that Codespaces service would only be used by the people in that Microsoft ecosystem, whereas now people are being given this tool natively in their kind of language and ecosystem agnostic community that they can use and have access to. Like you say, if you've got low bandwidth, or maybe you don't have a powerful dev machine, you've got that available to you in the cloud.
Or you want to rent a powerful dev machine for a couple of hours to do some compiling, and then you'll go back to your normal dev machine, your Chromebook or whatever.
Exactly. I think that's fantastic in terms of, well, I said making things more accessible, but yeah, just it's great to see that this. I think that move shows that this GitHub acquisition by Microsoft is not about pushing people to Azure. In fact, it's almost the opposite. It's about embracing a community.
Yeah. Microsoft's goal kind of aligns with, you know, this is why Microsoft were a good home. We actually, you know, I'd mentioned I'd been involved in some of the acquisition stuff. I remember talking about acquiring GitHub, you know, back in say 2012 or something like that. You know what I mean? It's something that we definitely thought about for a while. But back then, Microsoft wouldn't have been the right home for GitHub. Like we knew the company needed to change and would have broken it if it have like gone to do an acquisition earlier on. But by the time we got to 2008, Microsoft had changed. GitHub had remained and was this shining light of contribution and things, but Microsoft had managed to change itself enough to be a better home for it, I think. So yeah, that's why I was quite grateful. But the goals align. Like Microsoft's goal is to you know, empower everybody to achieve more, and you know, GitHub is about developers, and so it's and making sure everybody can achieve more with development and things. So they definitely align, and definitely. So it's fantastic, sort of that these charters kind of came together, and now you've got the resources of Microsoft able to support the mission of GitHub. So yeah, it's fantastic, and this flow of technology as well. So you know, we brought in Actions. Actions was actually based on a technology called Azure Pipelines in the past, and Codespaces was obviously built on a lot of the VS Code and the VS Codespaces kind of stuff that had come in the past. So we have access to not just resources in terms of financial resources, but in terms of learning and money. And Microsoft Research is just this amazing things you can talk to some amazingly clever people. When I used to work at Microsoft, and I know we need to get back to it, but the thing I used to say is it had like the greatest standard deviation of intelligence of anywhere I'd ever worked at, because you know, it's a company, it's a big company, and you have the same people like me, you know, who's sort of bluffing and just getting by every day kind of thing and just, you know, making it up as we go along. There are actual geniuses that work there as well. And there are quite a few at GitHub as well, come think of it. But you know, there are actual bona fide geniuses like Anders Hallsberg and, you know, and just all these amazingly smart people. And you can be sort of sat there and like, you know, having dinner or, you know, in the cafeteria and bump into David Fowler or, you know, as I say, or Anders or people like that. So I do find that fascinating how the brain power that they've managed to sort of acquire there. But like to your point, Callum, the problem with a lot of that is it was kind of locked in there, because if you weren't in that community, you didn't really know these things existed. And I think with GitHub, people are starting to kind of realize, oh, hello, this is, you know, we're seeing the flow of it. And with Microsoft becoming a lot more open, we're seeing the sort of the flow, a lot of this stuff, which is great.
I can add something to that, because we moved to GitHub as well a while ago, just before, probably just before the acquisition, sometime before that. And even if we were from the ecosystem, we were from the .NET, we knew Microsoft and stuff like that. It was still a lot of new information, a lot of new tooling, a lot of new stuff coming all the time, not only after the acquisition, but GitHub was pretty active as well before that, and it's right now the things which you've mentioned, like it's not only a place where you can store your code, but this is the place which can help you in making you better code due to the automations or the actions which can, you know, scan your code and do the analysis and stuff like that. There's a lot of actions after that. IDE, totally fully featured IDE then in the browser. And thing which I wanted to maybe ask and raise here, because it was something what concerned us as well in the past, was do you draw a line between, for example, actions and DevOps? Because I think that it's right now the most concerning part for us at least is like, okay, we have the same tool for DevOps, we have the same tool for GitHub Actions, where we should really place it? Where is the draw line between what should happen in the repo, or maybe before the repo is getting to be merged, and what is going to be after that? Because sometimes it's hard to diversify that. How do you approach that?
Yeah, I think there's two questions there. So there's the first question about DevOps in general. So just DevOps and then CI/CD, and they're totally different. You know, so DevOps is you know, about the flow of value to your end users and making it and continuously improving. So like DevOps, the concept, and then there's like things which help you do DevOps better, like CI, CD, like Codespaces, you know, being able to onboard new developers in a day rather than several weeks and things. They all help you get better at shipping stuff. But what I think your question was about, Martin, was maybe Azure DevOps. Was that the question? Or like
that was totally about Azure DevOps.
Yeah. So Azure DevOps is a service inside of Azure. And it provides, you know, source control and work item tracking and builds and things. And some of that technology we have brought over to GitHub. And in fact, it's the same engineering team that look after both Azure DevOps and GitHub. You know, it's a combined group. So the Azure DevOps stuff isn't going away. It's not, you know, being deprecated or anything like that. It's still in fact, if you go along to the Azure DevOps blog, you know, the investments in boards have really gone up over the past, you know, few months, and you're seeing, you know, rapid improvements over there, especially. But obviously, in source control, things keep coming along, and we've just recently shipped like pipelines and stuff. But the focus is like GitHub is the hub, you know, GitHub is where the developer community really meets. And so we definitely are investing appropriately for that. So we're making sure that GitHub can be the center of the developer universe, and things like pipelines can talk to GitHub and boards can talk to GitHub as well. You don't have to, you know, we're trying to break down this notion of locking people into silos, you know, by having GitHub as this central point where people can mix and match and bring things in and out. Then it hopefully opens up the developer ecosystem rather than locking it into individual silos that you're either here or here. Well, to reassure you, the DevOps stuff isn't going away, but then it's like, it's a great question as to where do you put stuff? And I think that's what, you know, you've got to look at the building blocks that GitHub's providing you and say, well, is this enough to do what I want, or do I need like a value-added service on top of this? So pipelines provide some CD capabilities and things like that.
It feels to me like you wouldn't want to run, I mean, people do, but you wouldn't want to run an open source project on Azure DevOps, because it's not catered for community. You have wikis and whatever, but really it's more for kind of enterprise is the wrong word, but for non-public facing stuff, I think.
Yeah, that's also what I wanted to say, that maybe creators of some tools are not that explicitly saying where it can be used, or organizations are not deciding well, because that's what I've seen. I've seen mixture of both worlds, and I totally agree here that the GitHub as a hub is definitely a destination. But you've also mentioned a lot of things you are currently working on. I think it's a good transition to the roadmap, because it's also showing how you as an organization or collaboration across the organizations are as well open in this whole direction where we are going, because we have a link to the roadmap, public roadmap.
Oh, thank you.
Which is something.
This is incredible, because you're effectively running GitHub like an open source project, which is
well, we're getting there. What we need to do is actually shorten the feedback loop a bit. So if you scroll up to the top, there's a link to the actual. You see where it says public roadmap. That should be a link in the README file, just down a little bit.
Oh yeah.
So that'll take you to the sort of Kanban board, where you can see how everything's moving around and being planned out. There's a lot of detail there, so you might need to, you can get lost in it. But yeah, we're trying to be a lot more open in what's coming, what the roadmap is. Definitely when for a lot of people, GitHub is like this infrastructure that just exists, and they don't really think about it. It's kind of like water. And so what we wanted to do was just really kind of make it very clear about where we're going, what we're planning, what the prioritizations of things are. And what we need to do next is then kind of improve the feedback loop. So if you want to give, we've got the community forums right now, which is a great way of giving feedback, but we need to connect these two. We need to connect the roadmap together with the feedback from the community to kind of show where it's aligning and, all that sort of stuff. So we'll get there.
We've discussed a few things like Codespaces where we think that's going to really impact the Umbraco community. It's great to see on that public roadmap, and again, amazing to see something open, that there's other things coming which also are going to, I think, have quite a big impact. Okay. Things like discussions, which seems so simple in reality, but actually it solves some pretty big problems that we have in the Umbraco community. We have a forum, our Umbraco, and that's good for troubleshooting, and there's quite a breadth of knowledge there as well, historically as well. But over the past few years, we've had this dilemma of where do we discuss things like feature ideas? And they're not really for issues, because then you get an issue tracker with thousands of opinions and stuff. Whereas discussions, it could be for an RFC or any of these processes.
Exactly. And like a lot of people were using issues for those types of discussions. But the problem is, like, other people kind of had this tension that they felt they needed to close an issue, they needed to mark it as complete, and we're almost kind of back to this sustainability angle. For a lot of maintainers, having open issues was kind of emotional debt that they didn't want to be carrying with them, and so they were kind of closing them out. Discussions, you can think of discussions as basically just issues on steroids, underneath it's actually stored as an issue with a lot of kind of functionality over the top of it. And you can easily convert a discussion if you decide, all right, yes, this is a good idea, right, let's turn it into an issue. And issues then become bits of work, whether or not it's fixing a bug or if it's a task or whatever, it becomes an item of work, whereas the discussion is should we do the work or not? And then once you've decided, yes, we should, then you go convert it into an issue. So right now, discussions is in public beta. Obviously, if the Umbraco community decide they'd like to give it a try, then we can talk about getting the Umbraco community over into discussions beta. But yeah, it's great and it's good way to do feedback.
Dodgy is maybe the wrong word, but we have a repo for RFCs where you submit a pull request.
That's a very common way of doing it. Yeah, for sure.
I think I can't remember. Maybe one of the JavaScript communities, that kind of model was followed.
JavaScript does this and PowerShell as well, but yeah.
Nice having this structured and I guess searchable and stuff. Something else I wanted to discuss, which actually relates to the name of this episode, and something that's been happening this week a bit, which for better or for worse, there was a viral trend this week of what's stopping you code
What's
like
stopping you coding like this? And it was all
and
green or whatever.
It was all about the
life.
green tiles on the contribution graph. Now, something that I heard, I think it was a satellite, and it was tweeted the other day, but I've not been able to find a link for this. Is it true that the contribution graph is going to be extended beyond just pull requests or code commits?
It's also it's all contributions, so issues as well as and all that sort of stuff. And discussions and things, and because they're all contributions. You've got, it's not just contributions of code. You're giving time to a project, and so they're just as valid a contribution as anything else. Where we did talk about it, a satellite was actually being able to have your contribution graph show public and private kind of contributions, in terms of hotspots. There you go. I love that 3D view.
That's nice.
So yeah. One of the things I was actually thinking about doing was getting those 3D printed for people, but then it's back to, which would be cool, but then it's back to the problem about, I don't want people I want that to be green and white. I don't want that to be all at the top. And if you know what I mean, you need rest. You need breaks.
That was the whole thing of this week, wasn't it? It's not healthy.
I love this discussion, to be honest. I'm an ambassador of work-life balance since I overworked myself in the past. So when I've seen some of the totally top dark green graphs, I'm more afraid than jealous.
Yeah, I mean that one looks healthy to me, because you've got breaks at the weekend. You've got a couple of gaps where you're taking vacations. You've actually taken vacations. So
this includes your private repos as well, I guess, Marcin. So
it's all. Yeah.
I mean, and if you want to look at mine, let's not do shame. So go to github.com, whack Martin Woodward. You're going to see a lot less green on mine, because I'm just one of these people that talk a lot and manage. I'm middle management nowadays, but and then so if you scroll down and it could be better, but you can see at least at the weekends, most weekends I'm not working, apart from if you go look at exactly, if you hover over when I was working, that you'll find that's just before Universe or just before something like that. So you can see when I was busy. And
I had that past weeks like that before Code Gardens and annual conferences in the Umbraco ecosystem as well. But
the problem with these graphs as well is it blows the axes up. So when you have a crazy weekend like that, then it makes all your other ones go less green. But that's healthy.
I think so. Yeah, there's.
We've lost Callum.
Oh, we've lost Callum. Hopefully he'll reconnect, Martin. But it's the work-life balance thing is vital, and it's back to being you're back now, Callum. It's all good. So we're just sort of talking more about that work-life balance. So I saw somebody who had one that's that was completely green. What's stopping you going like this? And it's I've got a life. And then I saw somebody who was a counterpoint did one where it was all empty. What's stopping you going like this? And my response to that was, I've got to eat. There's you've got to have this mix between the two. Don't be trying to get it all green.
It's a really interesting one, and I think my point here was you've got discussions, you've got all these other ways now in GitHub of contributing.
For sure.
It's not stopping you code like this. It's contribute, and that doesn't mean that you are burning yourself out working till 4 a.m. coding on open source projects. You might be helping test and diagnose issues or triage issues, or you might be engaging in discussions on forums. And there's so many different ways that you can contribute with varying levels of cognitive load, I guess, on the it's not about having a green thing and that being making you a better coder or a better contributor. It's about just
it's one of the things I love about the Umbraco community is that you are it isn't just developers. Is it because with it being a CMS and things, you've got people who are professional writers who still want to contribute and things. And that's one of the things. One of the reasons why I think Umbraco is particularly healthy is because it's not just nerdy devs doing nerdy.net stuff. There's lots of people who can contribute in lots of really good, interesting ways.
And I think we've got all of the documentation for Umbraco on
exactly.
GitHub. And
better than anything else.
It's all as README files, and sometimes that's not so accessible. But there's been workflows built into the documentation site around helping someone click edit and being guided through creating a pull request, where they may not be a developer, may never have created a pull request before. But again, introducing them to GitHub, and GitHub isn't too scary for someone that's never seen it before. It's still pretty friendly, and still you don't have to be a developer to understand it, which is quite nice.
And again, if we are talking about GitHub and in this particular case, it's also moving to the more human relation platform, like all the awards, GitHub Stars, which we also want to highlight here.
Yep.
It's also all about people who are writing this code or doing some other contributions there, but those are people behind the scenes, and they are going to be highlighted. They are helped in making their business and efforts sustainable and stuff like that. That's the whole part of it.
Yeah, as every open source project is 90% the people, and people are always the hardest problem in any open source project as well, in any computer science project. So you're right, the GitHub Stars are just this amazing group of people who are who educate and inspire and really lift up the communities around them. And so we wanted to find a way of recognizing them, but also find a way of finding out about these people. Yeah, there's Skeet. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. But finding out about these people, being able to understand who are the rising stars in, say, China or India or Africa, when I might not be personally connected into those communities. So we give the ability for people to come in and they can actually nominate people as stars. And then that goes through this process where we try and identify them and see if they meet the bar. And the important thing is it's not just about open source contributions, because people can be contributing to open source and that's cool, and great, and it's awesome. But we also want people who are really leading their communities in other ways. I was talking to somebody the other week who was doing lots of work in Africa, like helping out build a bunch of open source communities, help getting people into coding. And they themselves weren't actually contributing that many lines of code to different open source communities, but they were like the maven, the person out in the funnel, connecting everybody in and bringing them in and being the sort of the one that everybody knew within their community. So yeah, I would love to see some more people from the Umbraco community here.
And
so let me know.
You've hit the nail on the head there. You need this diverse people from diverse backgrounds to build communities, and they are every contribution is equally as valuable there. And there's no reason why GitHub should be this exclusive platform for just this small section of that community. It can. Yeah, I wouldn't want to hang out there if it was. No.
Quite frankly, the most diverse ecosystems in nature are the healthiest. And so the more viewpoints we can have from across the universe that are respectful and that are like listening to each other and supporting each other, then that's the community I want to be in. That's the community I want to be part of. And so that's the community also, again, you do a good job with this within your community of kind of trying to support that. I want communities that listen to people that are supportive, that aren't all, and get snappy and stuff. So that's why I choose to hang out where I hang out in certain online forums as well and avoid others.
We all know that Stack Overflow has a bit of a reputation for being a somewhat soul-destroying place at times. And it does feel like GitHub can be a far more constructive and positive place, at least in the repos that I hang out in. And maybe
it's very much dependent on the people in the communities in the repos to set the tone about culture. And we can build features into the platform to encourage it, but also it's reliant on the leaders of that community to kind of lead by example. And again, that's what we're doing with the STARS program, is kind of bringing together the people who are leading by example and then helping them share and helping them spread the knowledge of what they do. Like you mentioned Skeet, who's well known in both Stack Overflow communities and in the .NET community. But he's like one of the nicest, kindest people you'll ever meet, and he's very, very welcoming.
Yeah, we had John in one of the umbraCoffee's episodes as well.
Great, he's just such a lovely human.
Yeah, he is.
Exactly. And I think still all of us who are evolving in general, we look for inspirations and we look for examples. We look how to behave and how not to behave. So if we'll see more of those, I think it's always better for us to have an aims, have some goals, inspirations,
have some goals, have some stars to aim for.
Exactly. And as developers, we always want to become at least 1% better every day, or at least better from yesterday.
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's the good mission. So as a call to action here, maybe again, Umbraco community, nominate stars, nominate people around you, nominate people who help you on a daily basis with your goals, with your missions, with your adoption to contribution and to becoming better developers in general. And let's find out about people who we don't know, because we might know some of the well-known people, but obviously it's also helpful to discover those who are not that in front of everyone else.
Yeah,
I guess GitHub Stars gives you a nice little badge on your profile. But something I saw recently, which I love, and it's this kind of fun nature that GitHub has, is the Octocat Builder.
Yes. Do you want to bring that up, Martin? You can actually build your own Octocat, and then once you do that, there's companies you get the image afterwards as well. They'll email it to you, and then you can send it off and go get it printed, and so have your own, custom one, like custom stickers on your laptops and things. So yeah, it's quite. But even that I quite like as well. We talked about diversity and things as well. One of the things I quite like about the sticker generator is people can usually generate stickers which represent them and feel that they are seen, kind of thing, and that's important too. So yeah,
very good. I think so. We've probably covered a lot of the discussion points that we had around GitHub itself. Maybe we'll quickly touch on a few open source things from the Umbraco community this week. We had Umbraco 8.8 release candidate, which is yay. It's good to see release candidates. We discussed this before on an episode, that Umbraco historically would just kind of go, oh, there's a release, and it would be broken for a few weeks. But now they're getting into this a better process. And whilst we're talking about contribution, they've updated their release page to highlight key contributions and who made them from the community, and breaking them down by category. So accessibility improvements to the product, which a load of the community helped with. And yeah, you can see all of those wonderful contributions highlighted in this nice way on our Umbraco site. So 8.8 is out. Go give a play with it. It's going to be released on the 1st of October.
They're fantastic release notes. They're really, really good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they all link to the GitHub issues.
Exactly. So it's based on the GitHub APIs, probably. And
yeah, but there's a lot of work gone into that. You don't get that without working. So they're really, really good with everything. Those kudos to them.
Yeah, it's great to see all those faces here and all those amounts of contributions, because obviously it's an open source project, and if we are highlighting the people's efforts, and more people want to contribute, and of course we have Hacktoberfest around the corner, so we all want to invite more people to contribute, and every project is also awaiting some of the contributions as well. But also this week we had a product update from Umbraco side written by Runa, also highlighting previously new released versions of Umbraco, some of the improvements of the products in the whole ecosystem, and upcoming releases, which is right now already released, and what's new, what's next, also with the highlight on the roadmap and everything which is next. And of course, we, as usual, will link all of the things which we are mentioning here down underneath the video, so you can go and carefully read what is going and what is going next, and also where we all can help in discussions and in shaping the further roadmap and evolution of the product and products around Umbraco. So that's Umbraco, but we also had some package releases which we can quickly highlight. Kevin Jump released the new version of Translation Manager, so everyone who is using it, update to the recent version. And there was two new packages on our highlighted this week. One of them is helping in managing the partial text strings, so anything what is changing in the text strings, but with the portion of the text which is fixed, done by Christian, and Google Analytics events from Paul Seal. And those two packages were also discussed on some of the meetups during this week. I've seen some of the agendas with the guys mentioned there. So if you want to play with that, just download and use it. And also from my team, Adrian finally released the package which we've been discussing a while ago. And it's not directly Umbraco package, but it's a library which we can use to work with Azure Search. And it's a wrapper which can be consumed by Umbraco projects and all the .NET projects to work with Azure Search indexes.
Adrian,
yeah, that's
Adrian's done some great work with this package, but also with stuff around this package. So you are using the package repository.
Yes.
You are using releases and actions for all of your builds. So you've gone full GitHub here, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's I think why it was related good with that topic and today's discussion, because we tried really to utilize all of the great stuff on GitHub platform, which is there recently. And yeah, we are using also some actions to scan our code to also verify all the pull requests. So if you will go here, we have some pretty fancy mechanisms doing static code analysis and stuff like that. So yeah. And we really enjoy all of that effort, all of those things, and we want to play more and more with that, and include more of the things such as
Adrian's
and stuff like that.
Automation geek, isn't he? He loves all of this sort of stuff. So this is right up his right up his street.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So big kudos to Adrian and to whole teams and people who are exploring, because also we as I said, we were informed about the new stuff there, but until we are not getting our hands around that and not including this on our list, we don't see the whole power of that. We can also see the conferences, all the announcements, but in the real life, it's where it shows the full power, and we can highly encourage everyone to explore more of the things, because small improvements can make the big efforts on even small work items.
It's about what you said earlier, Marcin. It's making yourself 1% better every day, and those really add up by the time you get to the end of the year and by the end of 10 years, and it's fantastic stuff. Well, and great work to the team.
So some other quick bits of news then, maybe to finish up on. So we had GitHub CLI 1.0 this week.
Yeah, that shipped just yesterday. That was exciting. So this is the ability, if you prefer the command line, to be able to do, work with pull requests, work with issues and things, and not have to leave the terminal. So it's great. It helps with accessibility as well if you don't want to be using a browser and things like that. So check that out for sure. If you prefer a graphical user interface, then you can check out GitHub Desktop as well. That's good fun to play with. And then while we're talking about things, if you've not used it already, I know we don't get out much anymore, and we don't get to go to coffee shops much anymore, but you can check out the GitHub mobile client. It's pretty neat, and that allows you to go, review pull requests and issues and things on the go.
I'm using it all the time, to be honest, and I was one of the first beta users after it was released for Android. I'm constantly amazed by that, and I'm in the run all the time, so I'm really enjoying the process there.
I find it great for notifications too. Like, I find it almost better to do notifications through my iOS device or from a mobile device than through the web sometimes, because you just find them all there and you can check them off. It almost becomes like an inbox, really.
You also get a little a mark when you've got something to read, whereas on GitHub Desktop you've got the little bell in the top corner. And you get an email maybe, but it's not quite as drawing. Perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, pros and cons again. Back to sustainability.
But also here, on this note, I think that work-life balance is where for example, I turn off all the notifications. I don't want to check them, and it's same like I want to use the tool. I go to the tool, and the tool does its job and does it very well, even from the mobile. So that's the perfect scenario for all of the people who wants to keep their not only work but life sometimes closer to them, right? So that's also good. And one more blog post which left on my list of links opened, and it was about Umbraco Keep Alive configuration. Really well written blog about how we can configure it, how we can make it work for us and not surprise us when it comes to Keep Alive methodology. Same with the combination with the Azure, for example, and all the information how to turn it off and on if you don't want to use it. Great blog. And there was no more blogs catched up this week around the Umbraco ecosystem. So probably people will write more of them next week, because last week probably that was the one where we flagged 10 or something more about blog posts. So people share your knowledge, share findings and processes which you've done around the tooling and integrations from Umbraco, and share with them, share them with us as well.
Indeed.
Yep. That's all from the links of list of the links. I don't know, Callum or Martin, do you want to mention anything else? Did we miss something from the ideas to be shared?
There was a .NET Core, .NET 5.
.NET Core, yes.
But
exactly.
that for now it doesn't affect Umbraco too much. But in the near future, early next year will, which is going to be great. Bjarke discussed the other day about maybe doing multi-targeting of .NET Core 3.1 and .NET 5. So that's good. And when we finally get there, it means that we can use Codespaces, because right now we can't. Stuck on framework.
Right. But there's also some cool announcements for the C# improvements, and I've seen some pretty good blog posts recently discussing the records and some new fancy stuff in the language itself. I think I as a kind of C# biggest fan, I'm trying to be up to date with all those fancy things here. Of course, I'm not using all of them yet, but I want to learn about them. So yeah, it's great to see this type of updates and release notes. And I know that people are amazed right now and using it, and also measuring the efforts taken by performance teams in the .NET team. So yeah, can't wait to use it with Umbraco, to be honest, and also can't wait to see all of the benchmarks and improvements after we will move to the fully functional .NET Core version.
I've got time for a quick, interesting story there. Just an anecdote. Yeah. So we, I mentioned that GitHub Actions was kind of inherited some of the technology from Azure Pipelines, and the Azure Pipelines stuff was all written in a .NET framework. But then for Actions, we needed it. We originally did it when we first did it. It was .NET Framework 2, but then we needed to get it to work on GitHub Enterprise Server, which is a Linux appliance. So we needed to port it over to .NET Core and .NET Core 3.1. And when we did that port over to .NET Core 3.1, just the performance improvement was just insane. You know, on the same hardware, the same number of transactions, able to get so much more throughput. So the performance improvements done by the team and by the .NET community have been immense over the past few years. So yeah, quite excited by it.
I know several people who, when a new RC comes out, they update and they benchmark their entire.
The Stack Overflow team themselves are really good at doing that. Crazy.
A whole bunch of screenshots usually as well, and some quite deep dive stuff like, we've seen session performance isn't as good, but whatever, querying, and we've updated EF Core, and that's no, they don't use EF Core, do they? Well, they do in a few places. They use Dapper and there are other,
right.
But like they profile little bits of it and say, that's actually better now. This isn't as fast.
But if you can relate to the product or projects like that, and you can see that the single method can get that much improved because of the moving to the new framework, which is working behind the scenes, right? That's the beauty of that it's doing the work for you behind the scenes when you write the code. It's amazing to see that the same code, the same solution can work twice or even more times better. And that's why I think it's all awaited that much by the developers in our community. We are all getting there. We've seen a couple of weeks back or a week ago the working demo of the back office on .NET Core. The work is progressing, and we can all help. And I think it's also a good combination with the message shared by Lottie just seconds ago about Hackathon, which is also going to be organized in our community on Friday, October 16th. We can all prepare. We can all prepare. We can all help. We can all participate and use those fancy things, use those fancy tools, use those new features on GitHub and other platforms to explore on events like that. So let's wait for that. Let's wait for Hacktoberfest and I know a lot of people are just lining up the things to be worked on in the next month. So I can wait to see the output of it.
Indeed.
Cool. So thank you, Martin, for joining us today. It was such a great opportunity to listen to those stories straight from you, and feel welcome to join us anytime if you will have any new upgrades from your side. And we will, of course, follow and share all of the amazing things you are guys doing in your teams with our community, and try to keep and stay up to date with them, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And I guess all that's left to say is have a lovely weekend to everyone. Thank you for spending part of your Friday lunchtime with us. And